This is the last sermon in the sermon series, My Mind is Playing Tricks on Me. We've been dealing with mental health pretty much all of July. Ironically enough, through God's grace, it seemed like perfect timing because the mental health series landed around the same time that the hurricane did. So God knows that we needed it. Today, I want to speak on a subject we don't normally talk about, that we don't too much view as a mental health matter, but we all have moments like this. Today I want to speak on isolation and loneliness. Turn with me in your Bibles to the book of 2 Timothy. 2 Timothy chapter 4. Looking at verses 9 through 18. If you're struggling to find it, start at the back of the Bible. Make it a little bit easier to locate. 2 Timothy chapter 4. Looking at verses 9 through 18. The Word of God reads, "Do your best to come to me quickly. For Demas, because he loved this world, has deserted me and has gone to Thessalonica. Crescens has gone to Galatia, and Titus to Dalmatia. Only Luke is with me. Get Mark and bring him with you, because he is helpful to me in my ministry. I sent Tychicus to Ephesus. When you come, bring the cloak that I left with Carpus at Troas, and my scrolls, especially the parchments. Alexander the metalworker did me a great deal of harm, but the Lord will repay him for what he has done. You too should be on your guard against him because he strongly opposed our message. At my first offense, no one came to my support, but everyone deserted me. May it not be held against them. But the Lord stood at my side and gave me strength, so that through me the message might be fully proclaimed and all the Gentiles might hear it. And I was delivered from the lion's mouth. The Lord will rescue me from every evil attack and will bring me safely to his heavenly kingdom. To him be glory forever and ever. Amen. Today I want to speak on the subject, all by myself. All by myself. All by myself. John Newton was born in London in 1725, and he lived a tumultuous early life, marked by rebellion and hardship. Newton's mother, a devout Christian, died when he was just 6 years old. Her death led him to a lonely and troubled childhood, during which Newton drifted away from her teachings on faith. As a a young man, Newton joined the Royal Navy, but later deserted the Navy. After being captured and flogged, he was eventually discharged from the Navy and began working on slave ships. A dark chapter of his life that would haunt him forever. In 1748, while on a voyage back to England, Newton's ship was caught in a severe storm. He feared for his life, and in a moment of desperation, he cried out to God for mercy. This experience marked the beginning of his spiritual conversion. He survived the storm, and he began to reflect deeply on his life and his faith. Newton's transformation was gradual, it was slow, but it was profound. He continued to work in the slave trade for several years, but he increasingly felt the weight of his actions. Eventually, he left the sea and became a tide surveyor in Liverpool. During this time alone, his faith grew stronger and he felt a calling to serve God more directly. In 1764, John Newton was ordained as an Anglican minister. His sermons drew large crowds and he became known for his heartfelt preaching and his hymns. He penned many hymns, however, the most famous of all his hymns was one that spoke of the deep and dark loneliness that his newfound companionship with God rescued him from. To him, God's companionship was like amazing grace. The hymn reflects Newton's own journey from a life of sin and loneliness to one of faith and divine companionship. Its lyrics speak to the transformative power of God's grace, which Newton said saved a wretch like him. Newton's life took on new meaning as he dedicated himself to ministry and abolitionism. He became a prominent advocate for the abolition of the slave trade, working alongside William Wilberforce and other abolitionists. His past as a former slave trader lent a powerful voice to the cause, and he used his influence to push for the end of slavery in America. John Newton's story is one of profound redemption. Through his faith, he found companionship in God, which guided him through the darkest period of his life and led him to a life of purpose and service. Yep. His legacy lives on through that song, Amazing Grace, a testament to the power of God's love and the possibility of transformation for anybody who's struggling with a life of sin and loneliness. In the text before us today, ironically enough, we see another man whose life was transformed. Once a persecutor of Christians, he's now one of the leading voices in the Christian church. Paul, formerly known as Saul, like John Newton, was once living a sinful and a lonely life. Nevertheless, after that blinding moment of truth on the Damascus road, his life has forever been transformed. However, this isn't the young Paul that we see. He's no barnyard chicken. His missionary trips have come to a screeching halt. His letters are no longer being sent out to the various churches. He's beyond the years of Thessalonians, Galatians, Corinthians, Romans, Philippians, Colossians, and even Ephesians. He's reached the end of his journey. He's in prison. He's facing possible execution. and it seems like his time on this earth has run out. However, before it all comes to an end, he pens one last letter to his apprentice in the faith, Timothy. He wants to give him some final words of encouragement and instruction before his course ends. In his final letter, Paul compels Timothy to remain steadfast in his faith, to endure hardships, and to carry on the work of the ministry. Nevertheless, as he gets to the end of his letter, he takes a break from all that and he has a personal moment, a personal remark for Timothy. After all the instructions and encouragement, Paul breaks down and he has a moment of transparency with Timothy. He's chained up. He's in jail. Now that life has run its course, he's lonely. And out of his loneliness, he begs Timothy, do your best to come to me quickly. Now that he's seen the end of his journey, all Paul wants is a true friend to be close by. Yet and still in this brief discourse, Paul teaches us something about loneliness. For as we'll all learn today, even when you're all by yourself, God is still by your side. Even when you have no one else around, God is still there with you until the very end. Even when you have no companions, you can find companionship in God. But how? How can God be a good friend? What needs to happen to me in my life for me to find out that God can actually be a good friend? Well, glad you asked. At the outset of the text, we see that in order to find companionship with God, sometimes you've got to let some people go. In order to find out that God is really your friend, sometimes you've got to lose some friends. In order to sense the companionship of God, sometimes your immediate circle needs to get small. In verse 9, we see Paul beckoning Timothy to come and visit him as soon as he possibly can. But we also see why Paul is longing for friendship. It's because he's literally got nobody else around him. He even says it in the text. Everybody except for Luke has deserted him. His friend Demas has left him. Demas was too in love with worldly things. He liked to party too much. He's back in that urban setting of Thessalonica, where all the people gather together and have a good time. Crescens has gone back to Galatia, and even Titus, yes, that Titus, has gone back to Dalmatia. All his friends are gone. Only Luke is left there with him. Now you've got to remember, Paul's in prison. And now that he's at the lowest point in his life, all of his so-called companions have deserted him. But isn't that how some people are? It's all good in the hood, but when you're down, they're nowhere to be found. It was all good when you were traveling together. It was all good when y'all went out for every Sunday, Monday. It was all good when y'all were partying together. But now that you need somebody to play with, now that you need a shoulder to cry on, now that you need somebody to talk to, they're nowhere to be found. You try that you need them the most, they're nowhere to be found. And it's those kinds of friends that we've got to learn to let go. I know it hurts, but some folks you've got to let go. I know you thought that y'all were thick as thieves, but some folks you really got to just walk away. I know you thought y'all were closer than close, but some folks you got to let go. But here's why. Here's why. Because some friendships are not fruitful. Some relationships are not real. Some people don't fit into your purpose in your life. When I was teaching, that sounds so good. When I was teaching, I'd always tell my students that their current friendships weren't permanent. You know, it's hard to tell a 6th grader that their best friend now probably won't be their best friend by the 12th grade. Especially at that age, the 6th graders, they're real fickle. You know, one week, they're best friends, the next week, they're about to fight, then a month later, they're friends all over again. They're just fickle, but that's even true for adults. One week, you're cool, the next week, you fall out, then a few months later, y'all cool all over again. See, the reality is that some relationships are temporary, and some are temporal. Stay with me. Some relationships have a time limit. Other relationships have a lifestyle limit. Stay with me. Some people are your friends for a certain amount of time in your life. And then some people are your friends during a certain stage in your life. Either way, you've got to learn how to let some folks go. That friend that was your party friend, you remember them? They don't come around no more now that you've settled down. That's okay, baby. Let them go. They were temporary. That friend that was around when you were single but has disappeared now that you're married. That's okay. Let them go. They were temporary. That high school friend that you were cool with that don't come around no more now that you're trying to go to school and get your degree. That's okay. Let them go. They were temporal. Everybody ain't meant for every season of your life. Most friendships are temporary, and the other ones are temporal. You got to let them go. And watch God bring people into your life who will help you to serve your life's purpose. That's even in the text. Paul tells Timothy, get Mark. You remember Mark that I fell out with? Go back and get Mark. And bring him with you. Because he's helpful to me right now in ministry. See, in order for God to put the right people in your life, you got to let go of the wrong people. You need some people around you who are going the same way that you're going. You need friends around you who have purposeful relationships with you. You need friends who are in the same vein as you. And in order to do that, sometimes you've got to let some people go. Not only will you have to let some people go, but in order to find companionship with God, sometimes you've got to get back to your basics. Sometimes you've got to get back to what made you, you. Sometimes you've got to look around. Take a glance in the mirror. Take an inventory of your life and get back to being who God made you to be. In the text, Paul asked Timothy for a favor. Hoping that Timothy would come visit him, he asked Timothy, I need you to make a stop from Troas. I need you to pick up a few personal items for me. I need you to pick up a cloak. I need you to pick up my scrolls, but especially my parchments. Now that he's alone in jail in the Mamertine dungeon in Rome, Paul only desired a few things: a friend, a coat, and his letters. That's all he wants: a friend, a jacket, and his letters. It seems like a strange request, but isn't it ironic that now that he's in a cold place in life, all he wants is a jacket? Just a jacket. And the one thing that kept him moving forward, his work. He didn't want his old friends back. He wanted his work. He didn't want his tent making tools. He wanted his work. He didn't even ask Timothy to bring carpers with him from Troas. No, he just wanted his work. When you think about it, though, it all makes sense. When you're really lonely, sometimes the best companion is what gave you purpose in life in the first place. This past May, Psychology Today did an article entitled "To Find Love and Meaning in Life, First, Find Your Purpose." In this article, the author suggests that narrowing down life's many options to those that motivate you and leave you feeling satisfied and positive about yourself not only helps you find people to whom you are attracted, but it also helps them to find you. In other words, finding purpose helps the right people to find you and vice versa. Moreover, though, the author states that the benefits of having and feeling purpose extend well beyond finding like-minded thinkers and the near-perfect partner. Purposeful people have also been found to have better time management skills, better emotional regulation, less negativity and reactivity in stressful situations, and greater overall life satisfaction than those who feel little to no purpose in life. The purposeful people are more resilient when faced with setbacks and motivated to find the time and resources necessary to reach their goals, both personal and professional. In layman's terms, finding purpose helps you in all aspects of your life. Your mental, your emotional, your entire psyche is guided by the fact that you know what you were put on this earth to do. See, Paul knew his purpose. His purpose was to spread the gospel of Jesus Christ. And now that he's at the end of his road, he knew that he'd find comfort in continuing to pursue his purpose. And that's something that we all got to try to do. You've got to be who God made you to be. Truth be told, God may have put you in this time of isolation just so that you can figure out who you really are. Maybe God has you in time out so that you can figure it out. You know how parents do? They take their kids and they place them in time out so that they can think about what they've done wrong. See, God really is a good parent because every now and then he puts you in time out. Those so-called friends leaving you, that's all right. That's God's time out for you. That feeling of isolation and loneliness, it's okay. That's God's time out for you. That deafening silence you now find yourself sitting in at home, that's okay. That's God's time out for you. Sometimes God has to put you in time out so that you can focus on what you need to focus on. You're not isolated. It's just time for a time out. You're not enjoying that lifestyle anymore. It's really just time for a time out. You're getting tired of those same old friends doing the same old stuff week after week. Well, it's about time for a time out. Feeling lonely even though you're surrounded by a group of people, it might just be time for a time out. You're looking for more out of for a time out. God's trying to isolate you so that he can elevate you. But in order to do that, he's got to give you a little bit of time out. But not only do you have to let some people go, not only do you have to sometimes go to time out, but when you're trying to find companionship with God, it seems like just the craziest time that your enemies will present you with obstacles. As you get closer to God, your enemies start to do a better job of getting in your way. Before closing out his letter, Paul issues a warning to Timothy when he tells him, look, Alexander the metalworker did me a great deal of harm. The Lord will repay him for what he has done. The Lord will repay him for what he has done. You too should be on your guard against him, because he strongly opposed our message. In other words, Paul tells Timothy, watch out for that Alexander. He messed up my situation. You need to keep an eye out for him. After all the adversity that Paul has dealt with in ministry, here he is at the end of his life's road. Yet the enemy is still attacking him. He's locked up. He's lost all his friends. And the enemy won't cut him any slack. You think that he would catch a break now that he's at the end of the road. It's bad enough that he has to deal with loneliness, he has to deal with desertion, but on top of all that, he has to deal with Alexander, the adversary. See, Alexander wasn't some newfound enemy. Paul already had some history with Alexander. In 1 Timothy, Paul speaks of an Alexander. Apparently, Alexander was working with a man named Hymenaeus, and Paul believed that their false teachings on the faith had shipwrecked some of the people in the Christian community. Ironically enough, here we are 3 years later, and now that Paul is locked up in prison, somehow this character, Alexander, reappears. Now, we don't know if he meddled in Paul's case to keep him in prison. We don't know if he was still out there spewing false doctrines, but something Alexander did bothered Paul, and it bothered him so much that he gave it over to the Lord. But that's the lesson in itself. When your enemy rears their ugly head at the most inopportune time, just give it to the Lord. Sometimes that's the best thing that you can do. You can just give it to the Lord. Even when you're at your wit's end and you've reached a point of loneliness that you've never seen before, your enemies will try to come at you, but the best you can do is to leave it with the Lord. See, Paul wasn't trying to fight any battles. He was past that point in his life. He had written all the letters that he could write. He had faced all the adversaries that he could face. At this point in life, he's done fighting, but here's the shock. Even though Paul is done fighting battles, God's not. Paul was done, but God was just getting started. Paul is at the end of his road, but God is just really at the beginning. And that's something we've got to learn too. Even when you don't have any fight left in you, God will fight your battle. Even when you can't throw a punch, God will fight your battles. Even when you're about to throw in the towel on life, God will fight your battles. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. Sometimes you just got to leave your enemy in the hand of the Lord. But isn't that just like a good friend? Ready to fight when you're not? We've all had a friend like that. We've all had a friend who was ready to fight for us. See, I got a friend named James. Ever since elementary school, James has been my first armor bearer. Before I was a preacher, James was my original armor bearer. In elementary school, in middle school, in high school, even now, James is ready to fight for me at any given moment. But that's exactly how God is. You may not want to fight, but God's ready to fight whoever, whenever, wherever. Like they say, he about that business. It don't matter where you at, the Lord will fight your battle. But that's why he's really such a good friend. friends have deserted you, God will stand by your side. When you're feeling isolated, God will stand by your side. When your enemy comes to attack you at the worst time, God will stand by your side. And that's what Paul found out. That's what you need to find out. Friends left him, wouldn't even support him in court. Enemies were attacking him, trying to get him to fold. But when nobody else was there, God was there. But not only is he there, he's there to give you strength to keep on keeping on. You felt like giving up, but God gave you the strength to keep going. You thought your back was up against the wall, but God gave you strength to keep going. You were about to throw in the towel, but God gave you the strength to keep going. So what do you do when you feel isolated? What do you do? Know that God is by your side. And he's the best friend that you can have. We say it all the time. He's a mother to the motherless. He's a father to the fatherless. He's a friend to the friendless. God will be by your side. Dr. Mary Neal was kayaking in Chile. While kayaking, her boat flips over and she goes underwater. Watch this. She stays underwater for about 30 minutes. While she's underwater, she said a spirit visited her. She said the spirit brought her comfort. It brought her peace. It made her feel good. It made her feel like she was in Jesus' arms. Amazingly enough, she makes it to the shore. Some swimmers find her body. They resuscitate her, and she manages to live. She has no physical damage, no brain damage, no harm done to her at all. She's now living a normal life. In her book, when she's asked about this specific incident, she could only think of these words. She said, I was sinking deep in sin, far from